The flickering overhead light cast eerie shadows in my hospital room, and a chill crept up my spine. I had been admitted for a routine operation, but the air was thick with unease. The nurses were kind, the doctors professional, but there was one nurse who made my blood run cold. Her name was Nurse Grayson. It started with whispers. The night staff spoke in hushed tones about strange occurrences, patients who were fine one moment and gone the next. They called it bad luck, a series of unfortunate coincidences, but I saw the fear in their eyes. They would glance at each other when her name was mentioned, quickly averting their gaze, as if the mere utterance of her presence could summon her. On the third night, I couldn't sleep. The morphine drip kept the pain at bay, but my nerves were frayed. The sterile smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint metallic scent of blood clung to the air. As I lay in the dark, I heard the door creak open. My heart pounded in my chest. Nurse Grayson stood there, silhouetted against the dim hallway light. Her eyes gleamed unnaturally. Her smile was too wide, too fixed.
"Good evening, Mr. Hayes,"
she said, her voice sweet but laced with something sinister.
"How are we feeling tonight?"
I swallowed hard, trying to push down the rising panic.
I'm okay. Thank you.
She approached the bed, her movements too smooth, too practiced.
"Just here to check your vitals,"
she said, her tone dripping with false concern. She adjusted the IV, her fingers brushing against my arm, sending a shiver through me. Her touch was cold, like death itself. I watched her, unable to tear my eyes away. Her smile never faltered, but there was a darkness in her eyes, a predatory glint.
"You know,
She said, her voice dropping to a whisper.
we don't always get what we deserve."
I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my voice caught in my throat. She leaned closer, her breath hot against my ear.
"Some of us
She continued.
get much, much worse."
She straightened up, her smile fading as she turned to leave.
"Sweet dreams, Mr. Hayes."
She said over her shoulder. The door clicked shut behind her, and I was alone with my racing thoughts. Sleep was impossible. Every creak, every distant footstep made my heart leap. I knew I wasn't safe, not with her lurking in the shadows. The night stretched on, a never-ending parade of fear and anticipation. Hours later, just as the first light of dawn began to seep through the window, I heard it again. The door opening slowly, the soft tread of footsteps. Nurse Grayson was back. This time, her smile was gone, replaced by a look of grim determination.
"Mr. Hayes,
She said softly.
it's time for your final treatment."
Panic surged through me, and I struggled to sit up, to get away. But my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. She pulled a syringe from her pocket, the needle gleaming in the dim light.
Please,
I begged, my voice barely more than a whisper.
don't.
Her smile returned, colder than ever.
"Hush now.
She cooed.
It will all be over soon."
As she leaned in, I felt the sharp prick of the needle, and darkness began to close in. The last thing I saw was her face, twisted in a grotesque mask of satisfaction. The last thing I heard was her whisper.
"Sweet dreams, Mr. Hayes."
The next morning, they found me barely alive, the syringe still in my arm. Nurse Grayson was gone, vanished without a trace. The hospital hushed up the incident, calling it a tragic accident. But I knew the truth. She was still out there waiting for her next victim. As the days passed, I found myself confined to my bed, recovering from both the surgery and the traumatic encounter. My nights were plagued by nightmares, visions of Nurse Grayson's twisted smile haunting my every moment of rest. The nurses assigned to me now seemed sympathetic, but their eyes betrayed their fear. They knew something was wrong, but no one dared speak of it openly. One night, as the hospital grew quiet and the hum of machinery became the only sound, I heard a faint, familiar creaking. My heart raced, and I broke into a cold sweat. The door to my room opened slowly, and I held my breath, praying it was just my imagination. But it wasn't. Nurse Grayson stepped into the room, her smile more sinister than ever. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me.
Hello again, Mr. Hayes.
She said, her voice dripping with malice.
Miss me?
I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. She approached the bed, her steps measured and deliberate.
I have a special treatment for you tonight.
She whispered, producing another syringe. This one was filled with a murky, ominous liquid.
No.
I croaked, trying to push myself away, but my body refused to obey. She leaned in closer, her breath hot and fetid against my face. "Shh," she said, pressing a finger to my lips.
You don't want to wake the others.
Desperation gave me strength, and I managed to grab her wrist. Her smile faltered for a moment, and a flash of anger crossed her face.
You shouldn't have done that.
She hissed, her voice venomous. With a sudden vicious movement, she plunged the needle into my arm. Pain shot through me, and I screamed, a sound that seemed to echo endlessly through the empty halls. My vision blurred, darkness creeping in from the edges. I felt my consciousness slipping away, her cold laughter the last thing I heard. When I awoke, I was no longer in my hospital room. The walls were bare and gray, the air thick with the scent of decay. I was strapped to a metal table, my wrists and ankles bound tightly. Panic surged through me, and I struggled against the restraints, but it was no use. Nurse Grayson appeared beside me, her face twisted in a grotesque grin.
Welcome to your new home, Mr. Hayes.
She said, her voice echoing in the small, cold room.
No one will find you here. No one will hear your screams.
She stepped back, revealing a table filled with instruments, scalpels, syringes, and other devices I couldn't even name.
We're going to have so much fun,
she said, her eyes gleaming with sadistic delight. I screamed, the sound bouncing off the walls, but there was no one to hear, no one to save me. Nurse Grayson picked up a scalpel, her smile widening as she approached. The last thing I saw was the glint of the blade as she brought it down.